Chapter 1. The Man Who Wouldn't Let Las Vegas Die. Let the Mojave grow quiet around you. The wind is low tonight, moving sand along the highway in soft silver ribbons. Far ahead, the strip glows like a patient heartbeat, neon against a sky that still remembers stars. We'll begin at a distance and walk slowly, because New Vegas is a city that rewards attention. The louder histories rush to the gunfights. The quieter truth starts earlier, in the rooms where decisions were made before anyone knew they would become legends. There was once a man who refused to let Las Vegas end like every other city on the map. His name was Robert House. To the world that existed before October 23, 2077, he was a founder, an engineer, a stubborn mathematician of risk. The company he built turned clever machines into ordinary miracles. He watched markets and missile tests with the same steady gaze and decided that probabilities are not prophecies if you have the will and the tools to dispute them. Mr. House loved Las Vegas the way an architect loves a blueprint that already contains the skyline. Where others saw a desert of sand and excess, he saw a city that sold a particular civilized dream. Luck as a service, lights against loneliness, water borrowed from a river and poured into fountains that promised the night could be gentle if you stayed on the right side of the velvet rope. He also saw how fragile it all was. Vegas depended on pipes and power, on dams and distance, on the idea that tomorrow would be much like today, only brighter. He counted the days until that idea would be challenged and prepared himself accordingly. When the Great War arrived, sudden in its hours, endless in its echo, Las Vegas did not vanish in fire the way so many cities did. The reasons are argued over in back rooms and bars. Anti-missile calculations, hidden sites that answered to Mr. House's codes, luck disguised as design. The exact arithmetic is lost to dust and secrecy. What remains is the shape of the result. The towers shuddered but did not fall. Windows broke, people scattered. The neon cooled to darkness and waited. A few strikes landed far enough away to be warnings more than graves. The strip lived, bruised, defiant, unfinished. It was a survival so unusual that centuries later, people still argue whether to call it a miracle or a plan that worked. Robert House did not celebrate. He sealed himself into the Lucky 38, a glass and steel lighthouse at the center of a silent sea, and handed what was left of his body to machines he trusted more than time. He had designed for this, a life sustained not by luck, but by systems, circuits, and promises written in code. From that tower, he watched the Mojave remember how to be a desert without billboards. He counted caravans and vault doors, and the slow, brave return of people to places with names. Years passed like patient hands turning pages. Camps hardened into neighborhoods. Freeside grew up against the strip's fence like a lively antechamber. Westside coaxed green from cracked earth with pipes older than anyone alive. North Vegas learned to trust steel before talk. Out on the river, the dam kept its low hymn, and a state from the far coast followed that song east, bringing papers, uniforms, and good intentions weighted by distance. The new California Republic set up outposts and claimed jurisdiction the way maps do, confidently, with straight lines laid over crooked ground. Across the Colorado, a different order gathered itself under bull banners and spare Latin. It promised certainty through fear and discipline, and many who had grown tired of chaos found that promise persuasive. The Mojave learned to listen for drums from the east and speeches from the west, and keep its own counsel in between. Inside the Lucky 38, a man who now lived primarily as intent observed the balance and did not trust either side with his city. Mr. House understood empires. He understood that good intentions scale poorly, and that discipline, when exported, often breaks what it claims to repair. He had not saved Las Vegas for it to be annexed by paperwork or remade by a conqueror's hobby. He had saved it so it could, for once, belong to itself. But a city is not a thesis. It is people who need work and water, rules and rooms, theater and restraint. Mr. House needed hands, not only machines. He needed a civic style that could compete with uniforms and banners. He studied the tribes that had survived the Mojave's education, groups that were clever, cruel, adaptable, proud, strong enough to endure, smart enough to want more than endurance. From those, he selected 3 to bring inside the fence and reshape into something Vegas would recognize as family. This is the part of the story where many versions raise their voice. Let us keep ours low and clear and fair. The first tribe he chose would become the Chairmen. They had swagger and a sense for spectacle. Under different circumstances, they might have been raiders, kings of short-lived nights on lonely roads. Mr. House offered them a stage instead, in exchange for loyalty, order, and a cut. He gave them the tops, polished wood, red carpet, brass that forgives fingerprints. He taught them how to make cool a currency, and hospitality an instrument of control. They learned to dress like memory, and talk like the night would do as it was told. They practiced making guests believe that time could be tricked into pausing, that cards fall softer when the band hits the right note. If you have stood in their lobby and felt the temperature change to exactly what your nerves needed, you have felt the Chairman's art, a controlled weather made of manners. The second tribe became the Omertas, proprietors of Gomorrah. Where the Chairmen dealt in charm, the Omertas dealt in appetite, managed, priced, surveilled. They understood that vice can be a civic service if contained cleverly enough, and a civic poison if not. House did not ask them to be virtuous. He asked them to be predictable. He permitted the red lamps and the soft carpets, and in return, depended contracts, schedules, and a refusal to embarrass the Strip. They learned that the house that sells desire must appear to control it. Their smiles grew long and practiced. They took meetings in booths where the light was kind to secrets. If trouble brewed, it was meant to do so privately and be poured down the drain without staining the marble. The third tribe would polish itself into the white glove society at the Ultra-Luxe. They cultivated a culture of control so complete that it felt like grace. Etiquette became their armor, presentation their creed. They set tables with geometric exactness, as if each knife were a compass point, and the city would lose its way if one were off by a degree. Old rumors clung to them as rumors do to exquisite surfaces. Whispers about taboos they had renounced, and about those among them who wished the renunciation had not taken hold. Mr. House was not a romantic about human nature. He did not need saints. He needed a dining room that taught visiting power brokers to sit straighter, speak softer, and feel grateful for the rules. Together, these three families made an orchestra. House conducted, but the boulevard is the song. He gave them the Strip, and crucially, the sense that the Strip had chosen them. He presented their transformation as elevation, not domestication. He allowed their old names to echo in private rooms, while insisting their new faces meet the public on time in uniform under lights. In return, they patrolled their own lobbies, curated their vices, and paid their tribute. The Strip woke again. Brass swelled from stages. Chips clicked like polite rain. The monorail exhaled its passengers into a city that pretended dawn had been outlawed. None of this could have worked without muscle that did not drink, sleep, or join a faction. If Mr. House is the mind of the Strip, the Securitrons are its unmooded will. Stout-shouldered robots with friendly screens and decisive programming. They stand at gates and glide through lobbies, their painted smiles a promise backed by weaponry no one is encouraged to test. Their patrol routes are the city's heartbeat. Their "thank you for visiting" is half hospitality, half oath. Beyond their optics and speakers is a network of systems that live underneath the Strip, the way roots live under a tree. Deep in that network slept an upgrade House had designed long before the end of the world. A way to turn greeters into soldiers, if necessary. He stored the instruction for that awakening in a small, unremarkable object meant to travel through the Mojave the old-fashioned way, by courier. But time does what it wants with our plans. The delivery failed before the war, and the future spent decades waiting for it to reappear, which it eventually did, the way a card finally shows itself after you train your eye to see it. While the machines practiced their friendliness, Mr. House addressed the other crucial element of any Vegas worth the name: fairness, that looks and feels like magic. He opened the Strip incrementally, first in controlled hours, then with confidence. He left the Lucky 38 sealed to the public, a myth with windows. A tower you cannot enter is a rumor generator. A rumor is worth caps if you are patient. He invited only those he needed to speak with into his own lobby. He understood leverage, scarcity wrapped in ceremony. At the foot of his tower, the rest of the city adapted to the new grammar. The gun runners on the edge of Freeside sold the reassurance of good steel to travelers crossing the fence. The Crimson Caravan learned that reliable routes pay better than bold ones. In the old Mormon fort, the followers stitched wounds and taught classes, a stubborn kindness that improved the Strip's reputation, even when the Securitrons had done the keeping of order. In Freeside, a man called the King led with style and a soft heart, maintaining pride in the shadow of a fence that did not admit everyone. Vault 21, beneath part of the Strip, became a hotel rather than a bunker. Rooms cut from old halls, fair games turned into themed decor. Its owner cheerfully selling the idea that honest odds are a culture, not a phase. All of these pieces, rifles and recipes, clinics, and clubs are part of Mr. House's calculus. A city is not safe because it is armed. It is safe because people can imagine next week and have reasons to get there. What of the new California Republic and the banners across the river? House's answer was the same to both. New Vegas is a sovereign equation. The NCR could lease power from Hoover Dam and receive contracts and invoices, not fealty. The Legion could stare from the far bank and understand that crossing the water would not land them in an ordinary town. Securitrons did not shoot speeches, they enforced boundaries. The three families did not pledge to a flag, they signed with a gentleman behind glass. Does this sound cold? It is, deliberately. Mr. House did not design a home. He designed a system sturdy enough to host homes. He believed that human warmth thrives best inside rules that prevent the loudest men from deciding everything for the rest. He saw himself as custodian, not king, the keeper of a game whose honest edge is the only thing that prevents chaos from getting a better hand. If that belief seems self-serving in a tower that only opens by invitation, remember the desert's arithmetic. Out there, water and order are the same word, said in different rooms. The families prospered and revealed themselves. The chairmen turned nostalgia into an industry. Brass, velvet, jokes that land on cue. The Omertas made appetite into a controlled parade. Nothing accidental, everything measured. The White Glove Society made dining into theater and posture into currency. People argued in bars about which of the three was the true face of New Vegas. Mr. House did not join the argument. He preferred results. Full tables, small crimes discouraged, large conspiracies made unprofitable. Tourists mildly intimidated and quietly delighted. If a family tested the limits, as families do, House pressed a button and a Securitron appeared at a hallway's end with a smile that meant, "Do not." By degrees, the city regained its shape. Neon remembered its lines. Monorail cars learned their sighing schedule. The sharecroppers under NCR contracts watered tidy rows on the edge of town. And Westside grew its stubborn gardens to trade vegetables for scrap and stories. The Strip's nightly glow became again a kind of lighthouse for the whole Mojave, a promise that something complicated but functioning still existed, and that one could buy a drink, a room, a game, and a reason to believe in tomorrow for at least one more night. And always behind the glass, the man who would not let Las Vegas die watched and adjusted. He spoke through screens with courteous exactness, a gentleman's avatar, smoothing over the mechanical truth behind it. He allowed himself very few words, and even fewer shows of sentiment. If he had any tenderness left, he reserved it for the city itself, for the idea that a place built to administer chance could, in the right hands, administer survival. This is the beginning of their shared history. Mr. House and the three families, mind and manner, circuitry and ceremony, bound together in an arrangement so strict it looks like grace. Beyond the fence, there are pressures gathering that will test every seam. Soldiers in tidy rows, legions and dusty ones. Rumors about a platinum circle meant to wake machines beneath a camp across the river. A man in a checkered jacket rehearsing a smile that could cut. Those tests will come. For now, Let the camera hold. The lucky 38 lit like a patient lantern. Securitrons humming like polite bees. The tops pouring a drink exactly as the show begins. Gomorrah's red lamps drawing moths that think they're lions. The Ultra-Luxe shining its marble until reflections forget which is the original. Breathe with the city. Hear the turbine's bass note traveling along wires from the dam. Hear the cards, crisp as rain. Hear the soft, deliberate shoes of a maitre d' and the quiet clatter of a maintenance cart in a back hallway, where the work that keeps glamour honest is done without applause. This is how New Vegas survives, by making order feel like entertainment, and entertainment feel like home. Chapter 2. Contracts, masks, and the remaking of a city. Close your eyes to the neon for a moment and imagine polished glass. The Lucky 38's upper floor at night, lights low to protect tired eyes that no longer blink. On the walls, maps of the strip that change as you watch. Streets warming into arteries, doors becoming valves. A voice from a speaker, calm, exact, reviews numbers the way a gardener reviews weather. This is how Mr. House rebuilt a metropolis, not with speeches, but with schedules. When he invited 3 tribes into the fence, he did not call it mercy. He called it an arrangement. Civilization by contract. Each tribe brought strengths, vices, and a self-respect the Mojave had tempered into steel. Mr. House brought a city's skeleton and a promise. Order strong enough to host prosperity. The interviews. The first meetings were quiet affairs, not councils, not rallies, interviews. A handful of representatives from each tribe rode the strip's main drag in Securitron escort, past dead fountains and sleeping marquees. The doors of the Lucky 38 opened with a hush that felt like judgment withheld. Inside, the tribe leaders found not a throne but a table, and a screen where a gentleman's face smiled with exactly the right number of teeth. He asked practical questions. What do you want that you cannot steal? What do you know how to do without a gun? What will your children be proud of when you are gone? He did not ask them to be new people. He asked them to be useful to a city. The tribe that would become the chairmen arrived with swagger you could set your watch to. They told stories well and read faces better. They could have been kings of campfires and crossroads forever, but there is a difference between attention and respect. House offered them the tops and a curriculum. Hospitality as a weapon, timing as a creed, charm as infrastructure. He would teach them how to run a room so smoothly that guests felt lucky just to breathe in it. The tribe that would become the Omertas understood appetite and how to charge for it. Their gift was compartmentalization, front of house that sparkled, back halls that solved problems. House offered Gomorrah and a leash disguised as a ledger. He would allow a measure of vice so long as it was predictable, audited, and less damaging than the chaos it replaced. The tribe that would polish itself into the white glove society brought thrift, pride, and a hunger to be seen as more than survivors. House offered the Ultra-Luxe and an oath, renounced the old taboos that had once kept them alive in darker years, and replaced them with a doctrine of restraint so rigorous it would feel like grace. Etiquette would be their armor, presentation their power, consistency their proof. The terms. The agreements were not love letters, they were clean, binding, and specific. Territory and stewardship. Each family received a casino and its adjoining support spaces to operate as stewards rather than owners. The strip itself, sidewalk, wire, water, power, remained under House's authority. In return for stewardship, each family kept its house in order and its disputes private. Guest immunity and house rules. Visitors who passed the gates received a guarantee. Within the fence, violence answered to the house, not the offended. The Securitrons enforced this with the politeness of a smile and the finality of a gun that didn't need to raise its voice. Families could ban, eject, and refuse service. They could not disappear problems. Problems belonged to Mr. House. Revenue and repairs. A percentage of takings flowed upward to a central maintenance fund. Pumps, wires, filters, monorail track, the quiet miracles nobody applauds. House matched caps with infrastructure. When a casino prospered, its sidewalks shone brighter, and its air ran cooler. The lesson was clear. Profit is a civic service when it holds up the streetlights. Arbitration. Interfamily disputes never reached the boulevard. Complaints traveled by courier to the Lucky 38. Responses traveled back the same way. House kept a ledger of favors rendered and debts excused, a book that never left his tower and never ran out of pages. External politics. The Strip would not fly a flag, but its own. Trade with NCR was encouraged, fealty was not. Correspondence with the Legion was to be observed with academic interest and no signatures. If either power pressed, the Securitrons would remind them that neon can be neutral without being weak. None of these clauses were remarkable on paper. Their force came from predictability. In the wastes, even kindness can be a surprise attack. On the Strip, predictability became the real luxury. The training. House did not civilize the families. He rehearsed them. He hired tutors from archives, manuals from dead hotels, and when necessary, robots that could pour martinis to a tolerance of half a degree. For the chairman, training sounded like metronomes and stage lights. Dealers learned the crisp economy of hands that never fidget. Bartenders learned to set a glass down as if they were concluding a sonnet. Singers learned to deliver a midnight that felt exclusive even when the room was packed. A man named Benny took to the front with an ease that made people forgive him things they shouldn't. Another, Swank, learned to keep the rails polished so the train never derailed. The tops became a temperature, cool, always cool, no matter how hot the desert pressed its face against the doors. For the Omertas, training was a study in boundaries. Front of house perfected the red lamp welcome. Back of house memorized routes that never crossed, ledgers that never bled, and a chain of approvals that kept appetites profitable without becoming contagious. Nero and Big Sal learned to keep smiles steady while numbers moved. Cachino learned that sometimes the safest way to hold dynamite is to tell someone else you've found it. Gomorrah became a promise. The Strip would manage darkness so the city beyond could sleep. For the White Glove Society, Training was a catechism of manners. Marjorie shaped a public image that could smother gossip by standing up straight. Mortimer treated reputation like bone china, too valuable to use honestly. Staff practiced place settings until they could set a table in their sleep. They practiced their walk across polished stone until footsteps became music. Rumor persisted about who they had once been. The new doctrine said, "We are what we repeatedly choose to be under bright lights." The Ultra-Luxe became an answer to a wasteland question. What if elegance is not a lie, but a discipline? The relighting. Reopening was a sequence, not a switch. Fences went up first, not to exclude, but to define. Securitrons took their posts and learned their routes like dancers testing a stage. The tops opened 2 nights a week, then 4, then learned to trust that the band could play 7. Gomorrah's red woke slowly, like an ember, blown right by a careful breath. The Ultra-Luxe unlocked its doors with the drama of a courtroom. Hush first, then spectacle. In Freeside, the kings watched, measuring whether the strip's wake would drown their neighborhood or lift it. The followers expanded their clinic and started a class in water, how not to lose it. The first night the monorail hissed to a stop at the strip platform. Men from Camp McCarran stepped onto marble with the posture of soldiers trying not to look like tourists. They found a boulevard that knew how to greet uniforms without saluting. NCR officers wrote neat reports the next day about stability, private enforcement, and opportunities for lease. House annotated them privately with 3 words: paid. On time. Across the river, the Legion eyed the lights and spoke their disapproval in essays of silence. Fortification Hill added sentries. Cottonwood Cove watched the water more closely, as if the lake might one day choose a side. House counted both glances. NCR's busy, Legion's still, and wrote the same conclusion. The strip must be indispensable, and therefore untouchable. Edges and tests. A system is best understood by how it resists stress. The strip's first tests were small. A drunk pushed a dealer's shoulder at the tops. The dealer smiled the way the manual said. A Securitron rolled into the corner of the frame and tided the moment away like a wave smoothing sand. An enterprising lieutenant tried to serve a warrant in a casino lobby. The maitre d' at the Ultra-Luxe offered a private room, an excellent chair, and the reminder that the strip's laws are territorial by design. The warrant was served 3 hours later in an office off Fremont Street, and nobody had to wash blood out of marble. Gomorrah's back hallways collected a plot that would later have teeth. The ledgers noticed first. Then a man decided confession was safer than loyalty. The city adjusted a hinge before the door had a chance to fly off. Freeside had its own tests. The Kings and the NCR quarreled over refugees, rations, and respect. Julie Farkas at the Old Mormon Fort wrote 2 letters, one to each side, arguing that dignity works faster than bullets. A courier carried both and came back with enough calm to stitch a neighborhood together for another season. House watched without interfering. The strip survived because Freeside did too. Why masks matter. People like to say the 3 families are masks. They are, but not to deceive. They are masks like a uniform is a mask, chosen, maintained, protective. The Chairman's mask says, "The past is a story you tell yourself with a drink in your hand." The Omertas mask says, "Appetite can be contained without being denied." The White Glove mask says, "There is a right way to place a knife, and if we all agree on it, perhaps the world will not fall apart today." Mr. House's mask is the smooth face on a screen, the gentleman who never stumbles over a word. Behind it is the calculus, water quotas, power draw, refrigeration losses, the mean time between failures on a monorail bogie. He chose to show the city the mask and keep the calculus upstairs. That was not deceit. It was refusal to burden guests with the machinery of their comfort. The city as a pact. By the time the Strip's glow became a nightly fact again, the pact had sunk into the bones of the place. The Chairmen set the tone. The Strip felt cool because they did. The Omertas kept the night from cracking. The Strip felt dangerous only on purpose. The White Glove Society enforced precision. The Strip felt exquisite, even to people who had never owned an iron shirt. The Securitrons enforced everything else. The Strip felt fair in a way the Mojave rarely bothered to be. Beyond the fence, the supporting cast kept the city honest. The gun runners provided impeccably machined reassurance to nervous travelers. The Crimson Caravan ensured that the Strip's hunger for goods did not starve the towns that fed it. The followers converted compassion into public health. The kings converted pride into order without uniforms. Vault 21 converted a history of fair play into a hospitality theme you could sleep in. From the lucky 38, Mr. House measured it all by results. Crime curves flattened, water loss trended down, tourist caps trended up. The Strip's brand, so ridiculous a word for so serious a business, became synonymous with the promise. If you make it inside the fence, you will live like the old world for one night, and wake with your wallet lighter and your blood still in you. This is how the three families were made, not by washing away who they had been, but by amplifying the parts that served a common survival. The Mojave does not reward purity. It rewards usefulness and the ability to be predictable in a world that isn't. The tests that followed would be louder. A checkered smile playing his own hand, a platinum circle waking machines below a camp across the river. A state deciding whether a dam is a trophy or a tool. The families would show what their masks were made of. Mr. House would show what his patience had purchased. For now, hold the image. 3 doorways on the Strip, each different, each opening into the same promise. That order can be beautiful when it chooses to be. Hear a dealer's voice call for bets in a room that never admits dawn. Hear a maitre d' say a name as if it were a rank. Hear from somewhere beyond the lobby the warm mechanical purr of a Securitron. The city's steady punctuation. Under it all, hear the dam's bass notes slipping through wires like a long breath. New Vegas is awake, and for the first time since the world ended, it knows how to stay that way. Chapter 3. The Tops. Gomorrah. The Ultra-Luxe. Private lives. Public crises. Let the Strip dim to a warm hush. Hear the carpet drink the footsteps. the roulette balls settle like a sigh, and a trumpet hold the last note before it melts into air. In this gentler light, the masks are easier to study. We will walk softly, lobby to back hall, kitchen to office, stage to counting room, and listen for the places where performance becomes policy, and policy is tested by appetite. Mr. House designed the stage. The families learned their marks. People, being people, invented the rest. The tops, cool as a contract. The tops moves at a measured temperature, cool enough to make the Mojave's heat feel like a rumor, warm enough to keep the night friendly. In the lounge, brass and piano trade compliments. On the floor, dealers speak with hands that never hurry. In the back, ledgers tell the truth in neat columns. Two men defined the rhythm. Benny was the headline, checkered jacket, grin with edges, a way of arriving that made rooms decide to approve first and ask questions later. He understood House's lesson that hospitality is infrastructure, but he also believed there must always be an extra exit only he knew about. He loved New Vegas like a man loves a mirror that flatters him. Swank was the ballast, jacket pressed without saying so, eyes that counted both chips and people. He believed the Tops was a workplace with velvet on it, and that loyalty is what you do for the room when the room is not applauding. To Swank, House's rules felt less like chains and more like guardrails. You could drive fast without leaving the road. Most nights, their balance made the casino hum. Guests forgot the desert at the door. Staff hit their cues. Problems were solved at a table with water and a single complete sentence. On other nights, a draft slipped in from the future, a rumor that the gentleman in the Lucky 38 had overestimated how permanent his position was, that a different king could wear a kinder smile. The draft gathered into a plan with a bright, dangerous center. The platinum chip, a key to sleeping instructions beneath the strip and across the river. Benny found a helper with a cooperative personality, a Securitron that said yes so freely it forgot the word no. The Tops had been built to manage guests, not destinies. Benny wanted to host both. Quiet history does not replay the drama here. It listens to the aftermath. On the nights when Benny's ambition ran ahead of the contract, the Tops felt colder by a degree. Dealers glanced up between shuffles as if the walls had leaned inward. Swank stood a little longer in the counting room, reading the numbers like a doctor reading a pulse. He spoke in low tones to staff he trusted. The house must stay the house. Whatever sparkle the front man provided, the brand, fair game, cool room, safe morning, was the inheritance worth protecting. In some versions, the checkered jacket disappears and the Tops discovers that continuity is a style. The band doesn't miss a rehearsal. The pit bosses learn that calm is contagious. A memo from the Lucky 38 arrives, unemotional, exact, thanking the Tops for its cooperation and reminding them of the clause about subversive alterations to strip security. In other versions, a confrontation becomes a lesson written in a louder ink, and the Securitrons write the last sentence. Either way, the casino resets to its doctrine. Charm is policy. Policy is safety. Safety is business. The temperature returns to normal. The appetite under supervision, Gomorrah is a study in thresholds. Past the velvet rope, warmth, perfume, private rooms where voices grow soft. Behind the staff door, schedules, inventories, a map of who can go where and when. The Omertas ran this house like impresarios of appetite, and Mr. House tolerated that, because he could audit it. At the top sat Big Sal and Nero, men who mastered the smile that means later. Their strength was organization, shifts that fit together like cogs, hosts who could calm any storm, runners who knew which message needed to arrive unread. Their weakness was the same as anyone's who manages want for a living. Sometimes want learns to manage you. Profits fattened, rumors multiplied. The Strip forgives rumors the way a river forgives leaves. It does not forgive leaks in the hull. In ledgers that never left back rooms, a different story grew. Stockpiled weapons, unusual payments, introductions to men from across the Colorado who preferred not to sign their names. Cachino, an Omerta who understood that survival is a skill distinct from loyalty, kept a record that pointed in two directions at once, toward evidence and toward a way out. A weapons supplier under duress moved consignments through quiet doors. A specialist in the truly unpleasant was seen too often near those doors. None of this was the advertised business of Gomorrah. House's rules were clear. Vice could be curated, but not armed. Contracts could be sharp, but not treasonous. When a family's private ambition began to overlap with public safety, the city's mask tightened. How the correction happened depends on who is telling the story you're falling asleep to. In one telling, the course is corrected from inside. Cachino's ledger changes hands. A stash goes missing under very local fireworks. A meeting becomes an exit interview. The casino's front of house never flinches, and guests learn nothing except that the champagne tastes properly cold again. The Lucky 38 sends a brief note, audit complete, maintain current posture. Big Sal and Nero learn that being a steward is safer than being a sovereign. In darker versions, House's patience is shorter. A Securitron presence thickens in the corridors. The red lamps feel watched. A private plan collapses in a public room, and the lesson hangs in the air for months. New Vegas allows many businesses, but coups are not among them. Staff whisper the word sanctions, and the floor limits adjust until obedience becomes profitable. Either way, Gomorrah returns to its designed function, to corral desire into boxes that keep the city from burning. The Omertas repeat their catechism. Keep the front warm, the back clean, the ledger honest where it counts. Appetite remains, as always, a better servant than master. The Ultra-Luxe, etiquette as armor. Step into the Ultra-Luxe and the air changes. Voices soften without being asked. Floors reflect in a way that makes you walk more carefully. The White Glove Society built their identity on restraint so polished it looks effortless. Two figures conducted this orchestra. Marjorie tended the image, the posture, the phrases, the kindness that keeps formality from turning cruel. She believed the society's reformation was real, not only because it was necessary, but because it was right. What had once been done in desperation would not be done again. That was the doctrine, and she wore it as if it were silk. Mortimer curated the experience, the impeccable service, the menus that made old-world adjectives feel at home again. He knew that reputation is a currency that must never be spent, only invested. He also knew how to speak to those who missed the thrill of taboo more than they loved the safety of rules. In private, his definitions of tradition and taste were more flexible than Marjorie's. The crisis that visited the Ultra-Luxe did so with the manners of a guest. A person of consequence went missing. Kitchens that normally smelled only of stock and sear carried a different, troubling note. Staff schedules became puzzles. The society's past, thought retired, stood up and asked for a table. Quiet history declines to describe ugliness in detail. It suffices to say that a plan existed to dress a very old vice in new etiquette. What matters is the correction. In the version that lets the city keep sleeping, the plan is interrupted before it can make a public appearance. The missing guest is found alive, appalled, and delivered to a grateful mourning. Mortimer's ambitions are exiled, with a polite firmness the society practices for such occasions. And Marjorie stands in the lobby and states, once, clearly, that the White Glove Society's covenant with New Vegas is not negotiable. Securitrons observe without intruding. A note arrives from the Lucky 38 that says simply, "Standards maintained." There are other versions, the sort the Strip forgets for everyone's benefit. A scandal tastes the air. The Ultra-Luxe closes for a day that feels like a month. The carpets are replaced. A public apology is issued in words so beautifully phrased, they almost erase memory. Afterwards, the lobby is even quieter, and the knives gleam 2 degrees brighter. The lesson is the same. In New Vegas, appetite may be a menu item. It may not be a manifesto. The line Mr. House draws. From the Lucky 38, Mr. House governs without ceremony. His interventions are rarely dramatic, because he prefers they be unnecessary. But the line he draws is hard. It can be summarized as 4 short rules you can memorize before sleep. Guests leave alive. The Strip chooses its troubles. Troubles do not choose the Strip. Internal ambition stops at the city's safety. No one invites an army to dinner. When families drift toward the line, House begins with pressure you cannot photograph. Tightened credit, delayed deliveries, an audit that lasts precisely as long as it needs to. If drift continues, Securitron patrols thicken, floor limits shrink. A single backstage door receives a lock with a serial number only one building can issue. If a family insists, the city answers. The reply is not rhetorical. This is not tyranny for its own sake. It is a custodian's refusal to let the building burn. House's strictness creates a paradoxical freedom. Because the boundary is clear, within it, the families can be precisely themselves. The Tops can play cool without checking over its shoulder. Gomorrah can run warm without melting. The Ultra-Luxe can insist on elegance without insisting on illusions. The Strip's promise, order that feels like entertainment, is kept not by sentiment, but by maintenance. Quiet lives behind loud rooms. Public crises make the stories, but private routines make the city. A dealer at the Tops tapes her fingers before a shift so the cards don't bite. A floor manager in Gomorrah walks the quiet hallway between 3 and 4 a.m., straightening frames no one will notice, because guests sense when things align. A concierge at the Ultra-Luxe learns how to say no, so gently it sounds like a favor. In Freeside, a king walks a kid home after last bell and tells him that style is mostly about how you treat people. In the old Mormon fort, Julie Farkas closes the clinic ledger and writes one last note. 2 fewer fevers tonight. Good elsewhere, the city balances itself. The gunrunners oil a belt that would have squealed tomorrow. The Crimson Caravan reroutes a shipment around a rumor. Vault 21 refolds 1,000 towels, because fair games begin with clean linens. None of this makes the radio. All of it keeps Neon honest. How the families see one another. They are colleagues more than kin, but even colleagues collect opinions. The chairman will tell you the Ultra-Luxe is a flawless museum you're allowed to eat in, and Gomorrah is necessary so long as it never makes headlines. The Omertas will tell you the Tops is pretty until it has to solve a real problem. And the white gloves are either saints or actors. Depends on the week. The White Glove Society will tell you the Tops is charming when it remembers to iron. And Gomorrah is acceptable so long as its accounting is immaculate. Each is correct and incomplete. They complete one another's promise, even when they pretend not to. When performance becomes plot. Every family faces the temptation to confuse a well-run act with a mandate to rewrite the play. Benny wanted authorship of the strip's ending. Sal and Nero flirted with a private army behind the curtain. Mortimer wished to restore a tradition the city had paid dearly to retire. In each case, the city's design held. Masks stayed masks. Roles returned to their marks. And the neon kept its patient pulse. Not because people became better overnight, but because a system made virtue the easier choice. This is, perhaps, the truest thing about Mr. House's arrangement. It does not rely on anyone being good. It relies on them being predictable, inside boundaries that protect the many from the few. In the Mojave, where water and safety are never accidents, this is more mercy than it sounds. Before we leave the lobbies to the late sleepers, listen once more to the strip's nightly grammar. A chip's soft tick across felt. A glass set down as if ending a poem. The distant, friendly whir of a Securitron passing by on time. A maitre d' speaking a name like a welcome home. A pit boss telling a dealer, "Take 5," as if 5 minutes could save a life. They often do. The tests ahead will be larger. Flags at the dam, drums across the river. A city asked to decide whether it belongs to a state, a legion, or itself. The families will be measured not only by how they host a night, but by how they host a future. Mr. House will keep his hand on invisible levers. The strip will keep its lamps lit against a sky that remembers darkness.
For now, rest.
The tops is tuned. Gomorrah is warm and contained. The Ultra-Luxe is precise enough to steady the hand. And from a tower with only one unlocked door, a gentleman reviews a dashboard and allows himself, briefly, privately, the smallest nod. Chapter 4. The Long Game. A key, a bunker, and a city on pause. Let the strip blur a little, as if you're watching it through elevator glass at midnight. Far below, the boulevard keeps its ritual. Cards whisper, ice taps crystal. The Securitrons hum their agreeable patrol. Far away, the river presses its patient weight against concrete and refuses to care who is speaking loudly today. Between those lights and that water lives a plan that began before the world ended and was stubborn enough to wait for someone to finish it. The chip that meant wake. Before the bombs, Robert House wrote a message to himself and stored it in steel and silicon. He called it a solution, a way to upgrade every Securitron on the strip and to open a sealed vault of machines sleeping under the eastern hills. The platinum chip looks like a gambling joke, flashy and small. But its joke lands like a thesis. Insert here, it says, and the city remembers what I meant it to be. Delivery failed. The world stopped long enough that schedules forgot their names. Decades later, the chip drifted back into the Mojave's circulation the way artifacts do, carried by habits older than governments. The Mojave Express logged it as an obligation. Couriers who know that trust is a route you walk agreed to carry it. One veteran of long roads declined, the sort of refusal born from a talent for smelling history before it announces itself. Another took the job. What followed is a story the desert loves to retell at low volume. An ambush in a cemetery, a checkered smile, a robot with a cowboy accent, a second chance stitched together in a clinic that survives on kindness and glue. We won't linger. Quiet history keeps moving. Mr. House had not been idle while time rearranged his schedule. He had eyes in unusual places and friends who didn't sleep. A Securitron named Victor loitered where it mattered. Cameras took interest without blinking. When the courier who now mattered reached the strip, the Lucky 38's locked doors unlocked with the soft conviction of a plan pleased to see itself again. House explained the chip as if he were offering instructions for a simple appliance. Polite, precise, no waste. One slot upstairs in the Lucky 38 would teach every Securitron new tricks, heavier armor, a better laser for the smile. Ordnance tucked away behind that grin. Another slot waited in a bunker at Fortification Hill, beneath the Legion's camp, where an unrevealed cohort of Securitrons lay in the tidy darkness of pre-war storage. Use the chip at both sites, and the strip's hospitality staff would go from greeters to a deterrent an Empire would think twice about arguing with. A plan like that assumes two things. First, you can get to both locks. Second, you can hold the city steady while you try. The fort's door in the earth, across the Colorado, the Legion had arranged the desert into tidy shapes. Their banners bit at the wind. Their camps repeated themselves like a creed. At the center of that geometry rose Fortification Hill, all stone and authority. On its surface, a nation rehearsed certainty. Underneath, in a bunker the modern occupants did not understand, sat the second half of Mr. House's sentence. Caesar, patient, rhetorical, and convinced, understood at least this much. There was a door beneath his feet that did not belong to his story. He invited the courier east, set a chair in a tent, and made his case that old dreams should be extinguished in service of new order. He requested, with the courtesy that comes before commands, that the bunker be destroyed. The Legion is many things. Fond of ambiguity is not one of them. In some versions of this chapter, the door opens. Lights wake in a long concrete throat. Rows of Securitrons gleam like obedient punctuation. The chip completes its circle, and the future inhales. In other versions, the air below fills with smoke, and the door goes to sleep forever. Quiet history records both possibilities and the feeling they share. A choice, measured not in speeches, but in volts. The bear's patience, the bull's certainty. While the chip moved and the bunker waited, the Mojave's two loudest neighbors performed their natures. The new California Republic practiced patience made of paper and boots. At Camp McCarran, officers sharpened pencils and plans. At Camp Forlorn Hope, troopers stitched each other and their flag. Ranger stations along the lake, Delta, Echo, Golf, Juliet, watched water and sent reports that sounded like weather forecasts. Clear, clear, mostly clear. NCR sharecroppers on the strip's edge bent over rows that drank the Colorado by permission. In a glass building called HELIOS One, engineers asked the sun to choose between being a neighbor and being a weapon, then argued until they were tired enough to be careful. Across the river, Caesar's legion rehearsed certainty. Geometry is a comfort if you live inside it. Cottonwood Cove kept boats and silence. The fort refined obedience into ritual. Legate Lanius, steel given orders and turned bipedal, embodied the part of empire that prefers nouns to adjectives. Word spread that Caesar himself was ill, private threads tugging at a public banner. But the drumbeat did not change. The river is an argument you cannot shout across, you must cross it. The Legion prepared to do so. How 3 casinos become a hinge. The long game is never only played on the board everyone is watching. While the dam gathered banners and the fort whispered to its buried door, the strip's 3 houses performed a quieter kind of strategy. At the tops, continuity became a civic service. With Benny's plans interrupted and the checkered punctuation removed from the sentence, Swank set about proving that competence is a mood guests can feel. Bands kept their sets. Dealers kept their cadence. The tops made "it's fine" into a promise and sold it for fair prices. Soldiers from McCarran came off shift to rooms that didn't wobble. That steadiness mattered. An army fights better when it can imagine sleeping somewhere that isn't a tent. At Gomorrah, the Omertas were reminded, with either a whisper or something louder, that private ambition ends where public risk begins. A scheme imagined in red light does not count until it survives an audit. The correction, however it arrived, restored the casino to its stated purpose. Appetite contained, booked, and taxed, rather than broadcast. You cannot defend a city if one of its rooms is trying to set itself on fire. At the Ultra-Luxe, the White Glove Society doubled down on their covenant. Marjorie insisted that elegance is a form of discipline. Mortimer went where he was told or left, depending on the version you've heard. The result was the same. Visiting envoys walked across floors polished to the point of diplomacy and decided, perhaps unconsciously, that a place capable of this kind of restraint was not a place to topple casually. Together the families created gravity. Merchants routed caravans to meet that gravity. The Crimson Caravan wrote schedules that treated the Strip as a fact. The gunrunners kept a kiosk of civility on the edge of Freeside, polite machinery for impolite times. The followers of the apocalypse turned their clinic at the old Mormon fort into a public conscience the city couldn't buy, but benefited from anyway. The Kings kept pride in Freeside from becoming a fight the Strip would lose by winning. Mr. House counted these as assets as real as robots. Every full hotel, every uneventful night, every patient with bandages instead of a funeral. A quiet argument that knew Vegas worked and thus had a right to continue. The upgrade that changes voices. When the chip met the lucky 38's slot, the change announced itself without gloating. Securitrons recompiled their manners. Beneath the smile and the bow tie, plating thickened. The beam behind the friendly eye sharpened. Compartments that had spent decades shutting neatly. Do not concern yourself with what is inside. Opened. And the Strip learned that the machine's vocabulary included missiles and a sterner kind of laser. The patrols did not become cruel. They became confident. Welcome to the Strip sounded exactly the same, and somehow different. Confidence is contagious. Freeside saw fewer brawls spill past its chalk lines. Westside gardens slept without hearing boots at the fence. McCarran officers wrote that patrols inside the city were handled adequately by local assets. A dry phrase that translates to, "We can focus elsewhere." Across the river, the fort watched metal move with a new purpose and felt, perhaps for the first time, that something under their feet had opinions. When the chip met the bunker, if it met the bunker, the effect was less visible and more final. A buried cohort of Securitrons, pre-war crisp, answered roll call. The city had an army it did not need to parade. If instead the bunker was destroyed, the plan narrowed, but did not end. Houses' upgrade on the Strip alone was enough to turn hospitality into policy you could not push around. The city learns to hold its breath. There is a period in every story when everyone knows the next scene will be loud, and nobody wants to say so. The Mojave entered that hush. Radio New Vegas added more music and fewer predictions. At the Mojave outpost, 2 Bronze Rangers shook hands forever, while troopers compared rumors. Boulder City shone its memorial names and remembered how expensive mistakes can be. At Novak, a dinosaur watched the highway and pretended it had always been a lookout. HELIOS One aligned mirrors and decided, this week, against drama. On the Strip, the families perfected the art of not flinching. The tops greeted soldiers and drifters with the same cool. Gomorrah kept its heat inside walls that didn't leak. The Ultra-Luxe fed ambassadors and sharecroppers alike with the same posture. Victor tipped his hat more often than seemed necessary. Yes Man, the obliging Securitron whose smile meant agency as surely as it meant acquiescence, hovered near the edge of the story like a footnote that secretly changes the meaning of the whole page. Mr. House reviewed graphs. Power output from Hoover Dam hummed steady. Hotel occupancy dipped and recovered. Securitron incidents trended downward. A rough index labeled civic nervousness flattened into tolerable. He adjusted nothing he did not have to. The point of a long game is that you teach it to play itself when you look away. Why, this was always about the dam. Even a city that sells the illusion of timeless night runs on daylight facts. Water, power, repair. Hoover Dam is not a symbol in House's arithmetic. It is a machine. The NCR framed the dam as proof of mandate. The Legion framed it as test of will. Mr. House framed it as a switch that must remain under the hand of someone who believes in keeping both lights and rules on. The three families, by doing their jobs beautifully, made the case that New Vegas was more valuable intact than conquered. That case mattered when radios stopped clearing their throats and started calling names. Outcomes, as every Mojave tale admits, fork. House's preferred branch is clear. NCR buys power, Legion stays across the water, Securitrons enforce within the fence. The Strip remains a sovereign arrangement that never makes the mistake of electing a personality. Other branches exist. Independents, who prefer a city with many chairs and no head table. Statesmen, who think flags can be kind. Legates, who think kindness is a synonym for weakness. Quiet history is not here to adjudicate. It is here to explain why, when the dam later listened to boots and the Strip measured distances by heartbeats, the casinos mattered as much as the catwalks. Because a soldier fights with more than a rifle. He fights with the memory of a room where he slept well. A general decides with more than maps. He decides with the knowledge that order over there produces taxes and not rebellions. An envoy argues with more than doctrine. She argues with the feeling that she ate in a city civilized enough to deserve a treaty rather than a raid. The Tops, Gomorrah, and the Ultra-Luxe wrote those feelings into the prelude. The tower and its mirrors. From the penthouse, the Lucky 38's windows throw the Strip back at itself. 3 families, 1 boulevard, 1,000 bargains in motion. On a screen, the gentleman's face watches without blinking. People love to call House a recluse, as if his distance proved a lack of care. The inverse may be truer. A man who refuses to be a personality allows a system to be the star. He is a custodian, not a king. A host who never leaves the kitchen because that is where the fires are. He knows better than anyone that the next chapter involves the dam answering questions with echo and smoke. The chip will be either a completed sentence or a deleted clause by then. The Securitrons will be either a deterrent or an epitaph. The three families will be either partners in a city's dignity or footnotes about what happens when masks become crowns. He prefers the first of each pair, for tonight the long game has done what long games do when they're working. It has made the present look effortless. Listen, the monorail sighs. A dealer at the tops taps the shoe twice. In a kitchen at the Ultra-Luxe, a cook wipes the edge of a plate until the reflection forgets it is food. At Gomorrah, a host refuses a man very politely, and the man, surprised, accepts the refusal. In Freeside, a king walks a line that keeps tempers where words can still reach them. At the old Mormon fort, someone sleeps who would not have if the strip were run by speeches instead of schedules. If you need a picture to hold while you rest, use this one. A small, heavy coin of chrome sliding into a slot. A light turning green. A network waking without fanfare. A city choosing for one more night to be civilized on purpose. Chapter 5. When the dam spoke, the strip kept its promise. Picture Hoover Dam at first light, a long breath held in concrete. On one side, lake water with the patience of mountains. On the other, a river rehearsing distance. Far behind it, the strip holds its own breath, lamps still dimmed, rooms still tidy from the night before. The day history prefers, loud with boots and echoes, begins at the canyon. But the measure of New Vegas lives uptown, in rooms designed to absorb panic and turn it into posture. At the tops, cool is not a mood, it's a municipal service. The morning of the dam's decision, Swank walked a slow, precise circuit through the casino. Lounge, pit, cage, backstage, back to lounge, checking 1,000 small promises that together spell safety. The band's charts were stacked in order. The dealer's breaks were staggered, so no table looked nervous while the strip looked east. Carpets were brushed, so footprints looked inevitable rather than frantic. In the break room, a printed notice reminded staff, "Guests read our faces. We read the schedule." A special drawer in the cage held envelopes with pre-counted payouts, walking money, for NCR officers who had to check out fast without admitting they were leaving. Another drawer held the same for civilians who needed to look like they weren't running. Survival can be elegant, if you practice. When the monorail sighed into the platform, on time or nearly so, the tops welcomed uniforms and travelers with exactly the same temperature. A lounge singer took the stage early and sang low, a human metronome. In the back office, Swank kept 2 phones on the desk. One for the Lucky 38, one for McCarran. Neither rang often. When they did, he said, "Understood," and changed nothing visible. That is how you keep a room from learning the wrong lesson. Heat. At Gomorrah, heat is the point. But on days like this, heat must be contained until it is indistinguishable from control. Hosts in red remembered faces, redirected trouble with complement and geometry, and passed notes that said, "Not tonight," without bruising anyone's pride. Big Sal and Nero had been reminded recently and with clarity of the strip's definition of loyalty. They honored it now as if it were a profitable superstition. Back-of-house routes tightened. A corridor that usually connected 2 wings simply didn't today. A certain door's lock code changed at 8 o'clock, and every staffer discovered that someone had already told them the new one. On the 3rd floor, a pair of rooms, one opulent, one plain, sat ready for diversions, the kind that move a problem out of sight without making it worse. Good casinos don't erase problems. They reframe them, until the guest can walk away under their own name. A courier brought a sealed note from the Lucky 38 at mid-morning. It was very short. Hold the line you own. Keep appetite inside, Gomorrah did. And the Strip had one less thing to worry about, while men on a catwalk turned theories into noise. Austerity. At the Ultra-Luxe, etiquette is a religion that forgives nothing, and therefore keeps the peace. Marjorie stood at the head of the lobby and made the day behave. She arranged a breakfast seating for ambassadors and sharecroppers. That pairing was not an accident, and ensured that both received the same posture: attention without indulgence, dignity without performance. The dining room ran a paired menu, all precision and restraint. Broths that could be served quickly, coffee that never cooled, fruit sliced to suggest abundance, even when supply lines were nervous. In the kitchen, a checklist taped above the pass read like scripture: inventory, temperature, courtesy, repeat. Mortimer, if he remained, did what he was told with a face that created no rumors. Security at the Ultra-Luxe is mostly manners. Today, it had edges. A pair of white gloves stood near the elevators, their stillness an argument against escalation. Guests felt safe without noticing why. This is what the Strip sells when it is honest. The memory of civilization practicing on purpose. The Securitron voice. Out on the boulevard, Securitrons glided their routes with a new kind of calm. The sort that comes after an upgrade has been installed and verified twice. "Welcome to the Strip" sounded the same as ever, and yet it carried a grammar that discouraged experiments. Patrol density adjusted invisibly. Blind corners became watched corners. A smile on a screen meant "mind the boundary" in a dialect everyone understood. The machines did not posture, they simply existed with competence. That competence freed people. Freeside saw fewer scuffles near the North Gate. The followers ran triage as a rehearsal rather than a prediction. The kings walked beat with their usual style, and found that style worked better when the night didn't fascinate itself with violence. The city's emergency that nobody saw. Mr. House had drafted emergency plans long before anyone alive remembered. They were systems, not speeches. Power priority lists that kept the Strip's cores cold, and the sharecroppers' pumps wet, even if the dam stuttered. Traffic scripts that turned casino lobbies into quiet lobbies of transit if the monorail paused longer than courtesy allows. Debt amnesties in small, targeted doses. A pit boss could wipe a tab with a signature if that was the price of preventing a riot wearing perfume. Securitron postures you could not name, but could feel. The difference between welcome and warning, measured in half meters and angles. Most guests never noticed any of this. That was the point. A good city absorbs stress like a good carpet absorbs footsteps. The Bear and the Bull. At the dam, the day spoke in the languages it prefers. Command, reply. The metallic grammar of impact. Rangers checked angles that had names: Delta, Echo, Golf, Juliet. And reported actual weather for once. Wind from the west, light. Legion cohorts moved in their right angles. Certainty drummed into their strides. General Oliver reviewed maps and metaphors in the visitor center. Legate Lanius reduced arguments to the material they're made of. Quiet history keeps to its lane. It will not choose among endings. It remembers that there are branches, a bear that holds. A house that declares independence with new teeth. A yes that belongs to the city rather than the man in the tower. A bull that crosses and writes a different kind of order. What matters for our purposes is that while the canyon decided, the strip did not flinch. 3 houses during impact. At the tops, a dealer kept her hands steady through the first distant thunder. She had taped her fingers so the cards wouldn't bite. That made the table feel immortal. A trooper on leave watched the shoe and thought, absurdly and usefully, the world can be normal. Swank nodded once at the pit boss when a phone blinked exactly twice, the signal for no change. No change is a victory you can sell by the hour. At Gomorrah, a host guided a pair of men who had brought yesterday's feud into today's wrong room. She offered them a better room and a better reason to be in it. They accepted. A fight that would have made a story became an anecdote nobody bothered to repeat. The strip's stability is made this way, not by heroics, but by refusals that feel like gifts. At the Ultra-Luxe, a server refilled a cup that did not need refilling, because the hand that held it did. A diplomat who had slept badly found the appetite to choose kindness over rhetoric during a meeting scheduled for noon. Etiquette is not cosmetic. It is a tool you wield so the day does not wobble. Freeside and Westside, listening. Beyond the fence, life translated the canyon's grammar. In Freeside, Julie Farkas at the old Mormon fort prepared rooms that could become wards in a hurry, and, quietly, were not needed as badly as she feared. The Kings escorted a small caravan through an alley that can be dangerous on afternoons when rumors happen too quickly. Today it was merely narrow. In Westside, gardeners kept water to the roots and radios low enough that the children didn't learn to name the wrong noises. The phone that did ring. Midday, one phone did ring in the Lucky 38, a line only house and certain floor managers shared. The voice from the tower was not excited. It asked 3 questions, each answered yes by 3 different buildings. Are your guests calm? Yes. Are your books in order? Yes. Is the strip the same shape it was at dawn? Yes. Then, carry on. The call lasted 7 seconds. Cities have survived wars on less reassurance. The decisions echo. By evening, the canyon had said what it had to say, and whoever held the switch held it with more or less grace. The strip, which had kept its promise all day, turned its lamps up by a degree and opened doors as if nothing historic had happened. That is not denial. It is medicine. NCR officers checked out with envelopes that looked like courtesy, and were. Legion watchers on the far bank added a new line to their reports. Boulevard unshaken. Securitrons resumed their ordinary spacing, which is to say, the spacing that looks ordinary only if you have never tried to change it. The monorail exhaled, as it always does, as if it had been holding back advice. At the tops that night, the band took the tempo down by a notch and played a chart the lounge didn't know it needed. After. At Gomorrah, the lamps seemed warmer because the city had decided to keep them. At the Ultra-Luxe, the maitre d' adjusted a fork by half an inch, the day's last correction. Why the families matter when steel is loud. Armies decide outcomes. Cities decide how those outcomes feel. The 3 families made New Vegas feel like itself, on the day history tried to make it choose between versions of other people. Cool kept panic from borrowing a suit. Heat stayed useful. Austerity refused to become cruelty. The strip proved that order, given a stage and a script, can be as seductive as chaos. Mr. House would call that design. The families would call it work. The Mojave calls it rare. Before sleep, listen once more to the city catching its breath. The soft click of a key card in a door that will remain a room and not a story. The low murmur of a radio that declines to raise its voice. The friendly tread of a Securitron whose smile means you may rest. Out at the dam, water presses, turbines hum, and a new agreement, whichever one, has begun to pay its first interest. In the strip's quiet grid, 1,000 tiny routines start again. Proof that noise in the canyon did not unteach the city its manners. Tomorrow, the billboards will look exactly as persuasive as they did yesterday. That is civilization. Repetition chosen, not imposed. Chapter 6. Aftermath. The business of normal. Let the strip settle back into itself, the way a suit fits better after you've worn it a while. The canyon has finished its argument for now. The turbines hum the city's bass line. Neon warms to its evening color. This is the hour when history becomes paperwork, and paperwork quietly builds tomorrow. The first weeks. Bills, bolts, and breathing. After any decisive day, New Vegas does what it was designed to do. It itemizes. At the Lucky 38, the gentleman's face on the screen issues memos that read like recipes. Power purchase order. Fulfill at negotiated rate. Penalties waived for the week of adjustment. Monorail inspection. Bogies 2 and 5. Grease, torque, verify. Strip water loss. Target -2% by quarter. Replace gaskets in the north loop. Securitron posture. Reduce density by 1 unit per gate. Maintain confidence. No speeches, no parades. Bolts tightened, invoices paid. The glow looks effortless again. The Chairmen. Continuity as craft. At the tops, Swank codifies what the staff did by instinct all along. He turns cool into procedure. A set rotation for the floor so no table looks abandoned. A standing rule that the band starts 5 minutes early on anxious nights. A quiet drawer of walking money for guests who need to leave with dignity. Dealers run a drill the public never sees. 3 hands with a power flicker. 2 with a sudden crowd. 1 with a soldier who can't sit with his back to the door. The better they rehearse, the more the room feels like weather you can trust. The Tops keeps its promise. You will forget the desert while you are here, and remember it only in ways that flatter your stories. Some evenings, a checkered jacket is mentioned like a minor constellation, a point of light used to find other points. The casino's memory is polite. It prefers outcomes over epics. The Omertas, appetite with a ledger. Gomorrah files for its annual Appetite and Entertainment license, a ritual house invented so the city can measure what it permits. The audit is exacting and kind in that order. Big Sal and Nero learned to consider compliance a profit center. Cachino, depending on the version you accept, is either an internal conscience with good bookkeeping or simply a man whose timing saved the carpets. Front of house is warmer than ever. Back halls are cleaner than they have any right to be. A note from the Lucky 38 arrives once a month now, always the same sentence. Front bright, back clear. It's a compliment and a guardrail. The White Glove Society, etiquette as civic service. At the Ultra-Luxe, Marjorie turns reformation into policy you can photograph. A charter, elegant, brief, hangs near the host stand. Dignity for guests, restraint for ourselves. Tradition without cruelty, excellence without secrecy. Reputation is a commons, tend it. If Mortimer remains, it is as a curator chastened by scrutiny. If he does not, the dining room misses nothing except a certain tone of certainty. The menu pares down to dishes that can be executed flawlessly, even when supply lines remember they are deserts. In a quiet corner, the Society funds an evening each month where sharecroppers come in their best clothes and are treated like ambassadors. It is not charity, it is pedagogy. The Mojave learns table manners, the table learns the Mojave. Freeside and Westside, neighborhoods as strategy. Beyond the fence, the city's conscience keeps time. At the old Mormon fort, Julie Farkas turns triage notes into a curriculum. Water safety, wound care, clinic calm. Her ledger shows fewer emergencies than the weeks before the dam's decision. The strip's steadiness has ripples. The followers start a tiny apprenticeship for kids who can make a pump behave with nothing but a wrench and patience. The kings hold court with more mercy than menace. Rex naps in sun patches as if that were an order from on high. Pacer, in the kinder tellings, learns to sit out 2 fights for every one he starts, which is progress. In Westside, gardeners lay pipe with the solemnity of priests. Rows of green whisper a municipal truth. Civilization is mostly irrigation plus promises kept. Merchants of confidence. The gunrunners oil belts and argue tolerances. Their kiosk at Freeside's edge remains one of the Mojave's most honest rooms. Here is a tool, here is what it does, here is the price. Confidence in machines becomes confidence in mornings. The Crimson Caravan rewrites routes to fit the city's new steadiness. Fewer guards on one corridor mean more goods elsewhere. A ledger grows heavier and, paradoxically, lighter. Some numbers are a relief to carry. At the Silver Rush, the Van Graffs glow as ever, light for sale, with the fine print you feel in your bones. The Securitrons pay extra attention at their doors. House prefers few surprises where beams are involved. Vault 21, Sarah's Kingdom of Fair Play, thrives on the Strip's thesis. Guests learn over clean sheets and stories of honest odds that fairness can be a culture and not merely a game rule. NCR, Legion, and the Horizon. The NCR presence in and around New Vegas adjusts according to outcome, but the street-level feel settles into one of 2 shapes. Either uniforms still ride the monorail in sensible numbers and drink politely at the tops, or they become rarer and rarer, replaced by rangers with star badges who shake hands more than they salute. In both versions, sharecropper fields hold their rows and cash their water allotments like paychecks. Across the Colorado, the Legion either glares with undimmed certainty or glares with a patience that looks like wounded pride. camps stay tidy. Reports say little and mean less. In the far-off versions where the East withdrew, silence is replaced by vacancy, which is harder to plan for. In the versions where it did not, the river remains a sentence with a hard comma. The boomers, cons, and brotherhood. At Nellis, the boomers keep their sky liturgy. Some nights a plane sings. Most days, the artillery naps under tarps, a politeness the strip appreciates. Their children measure seconds and amperage, and the amount of quiet a dream needs to remain true. In Red Rock Canyon, the great cons, if they chose elsewhere, send back rumors of high trails and old markets, pride repotted instead of uprooted. If they stayed, they sell medicine and memory in equal measure and glare just enough to keep buyers honest. Under Hidden Valley, the Brotherhood of Steel is either a museum with opinions or a school that has learned to open a window. Elder McNamara or Hardin speaks for them, depending on which lesson the Mojave needed most. In the kinder futures, a scribe appears at the fort with a toolbox and repairs a pump with no bill, then disappears, because stewardship is the oldest doctrine. 4 rules that outlived the day. The strip's packed, houses in design, the families in practice, settles into 4 rules you can feel without reading. Guests leave alive. Appetite is contained, not denied. Excellence is public. Secrets are for safety, not for sport. No one invites an army to dinner. The Securitrons translate those into geometry and timing. The families translate them into tone. The neighborhoods translate them into habit. Together they make a city that can be trusted by people who have learned not to. Private lives in public houses. Quiet history favors small rooms. A tops dealer teaches a new hire the finger tape trick so the cards don't bite. She says, steady hands make steady tables. A host at Gomorrah walks a guest out to the balcony to show them the strip's lights, because sometimes perspective is better than policy. A white-glove server adjusts a place setting while telling a nervous sharecropper that the right fork is the one nearest the plate when you're hungry. The guest laughs, and the room relaxes by a millimeter. At the fort, Julie closes the ledger with the note, 3 fewer fevers. It is the opposite of dramatic. It is why cities exist. House, masks, and the independence question. If Mr. House remains, his governance becomes less visible and more pervasive, the mark of a system that is working. Contracts renew on time. The strip's lights dip for scheduled maintenance and rise to applause that was never asked for. Politics is how the city balances, not how it breathes. If the strip instead chose itself, yes man smiling in the wings, then the rules stand because neighborhoods decided to own them. The kings cooperate with the followers. Merchants self-audit. The families discover that independence is not the absence of obligation, but its distribution. Securitrons enforce consensus rather than a single will. The boulevard feels the same because the design was never about one man's posture. It was about a city's. Either way, the masks persist because they protect. The chairman's cool keeps panic from getting a seat. The Omertas' managed heat keeps desire from exploding the kitchen. The white glove's etiquette keeps cruelty from masquerading as taste. Mr. House's own mask, smooth, precise. remains a courtesy extended to a public that doesn't need to watch the gears turn to trust that they are. How the Strip teaches the Mojave. The Mojave learns from repetition. Boundaries are kindness. Fences and rules mean fewer funerals. Maintenance is culture. A tightened bolt is a public service announcement. Fairness is addictive. People return to rooms that treat them predictably. Dignity scales. If a maitre d' can make a sharecropper feel like an envoy, a city can survive its headlines. The lessons leak outward on caravans. A foreman in Novak starts a sign-up sheet and keeps to it. A trader in Prim starts weighing goods in public. A ranger at the Mojave outpost puts a bench in the shade where the line forms. Civilization is made of small ideas that own a hammer. The long view. Years in the Mojave don't stand in a row. They braid. Good monsoons pay for bad summers. A lucky tourist pays for a repaired pump in Westside. A quiet week at the dam pays for one loud hour in a Freeside alley that would have been louder without the city's habit of behaving. Now and then, a child visits the Strip for the first time and sees a Securitrons grin reflected in glass. He thinks it looks silly. When he is older, he realizes it looks safe. Later still, he understands that safe is the silliest and truest thing worth paying for. Some nights from the ridge near Sloan, you can see all of it in one look. The dam's dark geometry. Lake Mead like a coin someone dropped and never found. The Strip's crown steady and unashamed. The clutter and kindness of Freeside. The stubborn green of Westside. If you listen, you can hear the sound a city makes when it keeps its promises. Cards like rain, turbines like a heart, wheels on monorail track like a sigh of relief. Rest now. The long game has become custom. Tomorrow there will be a chipped glass to replace, a contract addendum to initial, a hinge to oil, a rumor to ignore. That is civilization. It is not glamorous. It is why New Vegas survived, and why the Mojave, despite itself, trusts a fence that glows. Chapter 7. Portraits at Closing Time. Let the Strip dim to its last comfortable wattage. The band has packed their horns. The monorail gives one final sigh. Carpets exhale the day. This is when a city's masks come off, just enough for you to see the faces that keep them honest. We'll walk quietly. Office to service hall, clinic to classroom, tower to window, and leave fingerprints nowhere. Swank, the temperature of a room. Swank keeps a notebook the size of a wallet. Inside are not secrets, only reminders you cannot automate. Dealers feel what the pit boss feels. Cool is not charisma, it's choreography. If a soldier sits with his back to the door, somebody missed a cue. He inherited a stage that once preferred a louder frontman. He decided the lead should be the room. His fixes are small and permanent. Clocks aligned, breaks staggered. A rule that a table never dies with a guest at it. When the casino breathes wrong, too quick, too shallow, Swank walks a slow circle, and the lungs remember. Sometimes a checkered jacket drifts through conversation, like weather from last year. Swank neither praises nor condemns. He props the door for a janitor, flips a chip idly with his thumb, and says to a new dealer, "Our job is to make normal feel rare." At closing, he stands a minute in the empty lounge, listening for something only managers hear. Not silence, but the absence of complaint. If the room reaches that state 3 nights in a row, he sleeps well. The tops learned that continuity is a talent you can hire for. Marjorie, a creed with lemon. Marjorie writes letters on heavy paper, fountain pen, 3 sentences each. To a farmer, "Thank you for trusting our table. Your presence civilizes ours as much as our service civilizes yours." To a scribe, "Your willingness to teach our staff how to repair a coil stove was a generosity of the rarest sort, one that keeps giving without witnesses." To herself, folded, not sent, "Tradition is only as noble as the harm it refuses to permit." The Ultra-Luxe under her care is a classroom for posture. Staff practice the half-smile that calms a room without belittling it. The lobby clock is set 5 minutes slow so guests are never late. The kitchen clock is set 5 minutes fast, so plates never are. Once a month, the society opens a second dining room to people in their best clothes whose best clothes once belonged to someone else. They are treated like envoys because that is how tables teach nations. Mortimer's shadow, in the versions where it lingers, is a line on the floor nobody crosses. In the kinder versions, the line is a framed charter, dignity, restraint, transparency. She reads it aloud to new hires as if reading a recipe. At closing, she walks the dining room with the lights at half and corrects the angle of one chair. People sleep better, she believes, when things line up somewhere. Cachino, ledger, not gospel. Cachino keeps 2 ledgers, one for the house, one for himself. Neither is a confession. They are instructions on how to survive without ruining the casino you survive in. He knows the difference between profit and appetite, and how quickly the second eats the first. He learned that loyalty without context is a fuse. He learned to bring trouble up the chain before it becomes a headline. To escort men with loud plans to rooms where they can hear themselves and reconsider. To hide nothing that will be dragged into light anyway. He is no saint. He is a man who realized that New Vegas keeps its promises only if certain people stop telling themselves they are exceptional. Now and then he walks the red hall that used to end in a plan and ends in a storeroom again. He touches the wall once with 2 fingers, the way you greet a grave when you have decided to keep living. Julie Farkas, the ledger that matters. Julie writes the city's only worth comparing statistics. Fever, -3 this week. Waterborne illness, flat to down, probably filters. Knife wounds, up 2 the day the radio panicked, resolved. She teaches how to boil without wasting to a semicircle of kids and the 3 adults who always pretend they're just passing by. She pins a chart on the clinic wall that shows what clean water does to a neighborhood's future. It is not a dramatic graph. It is a gentle slope that means life. When the strip is steady, the fort's cots are half empty, and the followers can run a class on basic sutures instead of triage. She knows this, and thanks nobody in particular. When the strip is not steady, she uses a voice that can stop a room. "Breathe," she says, and the room practices it. At closing, because clinics have closings too, she writes, "Good night, Mojave," at the bottom of the ledger and shelves it. The habit does nothing measurable and changes everything. The Kings, style as civic order. The king teaches, look after yourself and look after each other as if they were the same sentence. He insists on hair you can set a watch by, boots that won't embarrass the person who gave them to you, and a kind of graciousness that keeps knives in pockets. In the old theater that serves as school and court, he calls every kid sir or ma'am, because that is how you raise people who will not take cheap respect when they can earn the expensive kind. Pacer, in the generous tellings, learns to patrol with curiosity instead of tinder. 2 fights a week become words in a hallway, then 1, then some weeks none. Rex naps on the stage steps and does not wake unless the room needs him, which it rarely does. The King's real work is invisible. They make pride predictable. A neighborhood with dependable pride is safer than a neighborhood policed to a shine. The Strip doesn't say thank you. It funds a repair, nods at a gate, and keeps the monorail stopping on time. Mr. House, final arithmetic. In the tower where lights never fully sleep, Mr. House reviews the only prophecy he trusts. Trend lines. Power, stable within design tolerances. The dam's output, purchased on schedule. Water loss, down a fraction. Gaskets matter. Securitron incidents, a declining curve. Competence deters. External pressure, present. Acceptable. Noise managed by facts. He is not sentimental about the future. He assigns it probabilities, and those are the names he calls it. In one ledger, he keeps a column labeled Civilization and writes down the small things that feed it. School attendance at the King's Hall. Clinic capacity at the fort. Monorail delay minutes. The number of nights in a row the tops closed without a raised voice. If he remains at the desk, that's his legacy. A city that does not need to know he is at the desk to function. If, in other branches of the tale, he is replaced by a smiling consensus and a robot who says yes when the city asks for more chairs, the arithmetic remains. The design was the point, not the designer. House would approve, though he would not clap. He looks once, each night, at the Strip, through glass that corrects for glare. It is not romance. It is inventory. Epilogue. Fragments. A sharecropper eats at the Ultra-Luxe on a night when the second dining room opens. She laughs in the lobby because the floor reflects her shoes and makes them look new. She tips well because she learned in a field what good labor is worth. A ranger at the Mojave outpost uses his brake to mend a bench. He sands the splinters for longer than he needs to. Later, a caravan kid sits there and does not bleed for want of a small kindness. A gunrunner tech trains an apprentice to listen to a belt. "Hear that?" he asks. The kid nods, even if he doesn't yet. He will. In Vault 21, Sarah tells a guest the story of fair odds for the 10th time that day, with the same warmth as the first. The guest believes the city is honest for an hour. An hour is enough to sleep. In Gomorrah, a host guides a quarrel into a view of the strip and says, "Look, lights." They look. The fight forgets itself. At the tops, a dealer tapes a new hire's fingers. "Steady hands," she says. The table lives. In the Lucky 38, a screen blinks once. A memo goes out. Monorail Bogey 5. Grease. Torque. Verify. 3 nouns, a verb. Sometimes that is all a civilization needs. If you stand on the ridge above Sloan very late and squint, you can hold the Mojave's contradictions in one gaze. Concrete that hums, water that remembers, neon that promises, neighborhoods that practice, a tower that prefers numbers to names. It is not a happy ending. Those are for songs. It is a working ending, renewable nightly. Sleep now. The strip has posted its guards. The kitchens have cooled. The clinics have stacked gauze. The schools have swept their stages. The city will be here when you wake, because many hands, in many rooms, did ordinary things well at the right times. Chapter 8. Coda, the Covenant, the Sums, and Home. The strip is quiet enough now that you can hear the air moving in the Lucky 38's vents. The soft wash of Lake Mead against concrete, and, if you lean with your imagination, the slow turning of roulette wheels being wiped clean for tomorrow. This is not the hour for new revelations. It's the hour for gathering what we've learned and putting it somewhere safe. 1. The Covenant, what the 3 families swore without saying. Stand at the boulevard's center and look left, right, and across. The tops says, "Cool is care. Keep the rooms steady, and people remember how to be their best selves. Don't make a show of safety. Make safety the show." The dealer's hands become the city's hands, calm, crisp, predictable. Gomorrah says, "Heat belongs in a hearth. Desire is not the enemy. Spillage is." Contain appetite with doors that open the right way and ledgers that tell the truth. If something wants to burn, give it a safe flame and a closing time. The Ultra-Luxe says, "Etiquette is mercy in a tuxedo. Precision prevents cruelty. A table set for everyone is a weapon against panic. If the knife is straight and the voice is kind, strangers turn into neighbors for the length of a meal." Strangers turn into neighbors for the length of a meal. Together, without oaths carved in stone, they keep 4 rules the strip repeats like a prayer. Guests leave alive. Appetite is curated, not unleashed. Excellence is public. Secrecy is for safety, not sport. No one invites an army to dinner. That's the covenant. Not romance, not spectacle. A pact to make normal, reliable. 2. The 2 sums. What Mr. House measured and what the Mojave felt. From the tower, the city is arithmetic. Mr. House would write it this way: power purchased, on schedule. Water loss, trending down. Securitron incidents, trending down faster. Throughput, beds, meals, tables, steady to rising. External pressure, present, bounded. Maintenance, current, always current. Add those and you get function. The right to exist in a wasteland that punishes improvisation. But from the street, and from Freeside, Westside, and the stations on the lake, there is a second sum you make without writing. Fewer fevers at the fort this week. More kids in the King's Hall learning how to be proud without drawing a blade. One less fight at the North Gate because a host said, "Not tonight," and meant it. A sharecropper sleeping with tomorrow's water already promised by contract, not hope. A monorail that sighs at the same minute each day, so nerves learn to keep time with something gentle. Add those and you get home. Not a place that coddles, but a place that keeps its chores. House's legacy, in either version of the ending, him behind glass or a smiling consensus at the console, is that both sums point in the same direction. The system works, whether or not the screen blinks. Third, the Mojave's definition of home. Home, out here, isn't a roof. It's the chance to plan. It's a fence that means fewer funerals and more recipes. It's a clinic ledger that can afford to be boring. It's a casino that teaches steadiness as entertainment. It's a robot that says welcome to the strip and makes it true. It's a dam that hums because someone loved bolts enough to count them twice. If you need an image to keep, a kid from Westside stepping into the Ultra-Luxe in a borrowed jacket, uncertain at the threshold. A white-gloved server bows as if an ambassador has arrived. For 2 hours, the room tells the child that dignity is a habit anyone can learn. Later, the same kid tapes his fingers before a card game at home to keep the deck from biting and laughs when someone notices. That's how culture travels in the Mojave, by mimicry, by kindness, by maintenance. 4. Farewells in small rooms. In the Tops break room, a senior dealer shows a new hire the ribbon of tape she uses on long nights. "Steady hands make steady tables," she says, and hands over the roll. In Gomorrah, a host steps onto a balcony with 2 men and lets the skyline do the talking. The fight forgets itself. The night remembers itself. In the Ultra-Luxe kitchen, a line cook wipes the edge of a plate until the reflection is clean. He smiles, because work done well is its own news. At the old Mormon fort, Julie Farkas closes the ledger with the note, "Good night." She writes it every evening, as if the words keep the lamps on. In the King's Hall, Rex thumps his tail once at the last child leaving. The king switches off the stage lights like a curtain call. At HELIOS One, a technician puts a hand on warm steel and chooses neighbor over spear for one more day. In the Lucky 38, a memo leaves the console. "Monorail bogey 5, grease, torque, verify." 4 words that keep a city on time. 5. Last look. From the ridge near Sloan, the picture holds steady. Hoover Dam's dark geometry, the lake like a coin no one dared spend. The Strip's crown, honest about its tricks. Freeside's generous clutter, Westside's stubborn green. Across the river, geometry and tents. On the lake road, a caravan that knows which gates open with please. Over all of it, a radio voice that refuses to panic. Mr. House would say the model converged. The families would say the doors opened on time. The followers would say the charts improve. The kings would say we behaved. The Mojave would say, with its dry humor, that we didn't die today, and that's a start. Close your eyes. Hear the turbines purr. The cards fall like rain. The monorail, breathe. Hear a Securitron's friendly tread mean exactly what it says. You may rest. Tomorrow the Strip will do its chores again. So will the neighborhoods. So will the dam. That's the quiet miracle. Repetition, chosen and kept. Good night, New Vegas. Be what you have decided to be. Decent by design, glamorous by habit, alive by agreement.